One thing is clear. Paige Beckers is ready to lead the way. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I'd like to take a quick moment to ask for really a couple small favors. If you're enjoying the content, please take a second to subscribe. Follow wherever you listen to your audio versions, Apple, Spotify. It really helps the show grow, and I genuinely appreciate the support. Every follow, subscription, and download not only helps build our UConn community, but also generates more revenue for UConn NAL initiatives with our 10% promise donation to Bleeding Blue for Good. Also, I'm excited about donating 10% of revenue to Husky Ticket Project. I'm proud to partner with them to help send kids to games and make a real difference, and you can too. Thank you for being a part of this journey and for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. So remember, when you support this show, you're not only supporting UConn's NIL initiatives and the players getting money for their time, but also sending kids to sporting events like UConn football, basketball, wherever through the Husky Ticket Project. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, let's dive into today's show. Paige is definitely ready to lead the way, but she's not alone. And I think that's a really key point. There's two players who will likely define UConn's success this season. And Paige Beckers and Caitlyn Chen are the two. First off, we all know how important Paige is to this team. She's been the face of UConn basketball for years. And the exciting part about Paige this year is for the first time in her college career, as we've chronicled, she's been able to focus on improving her game without worrying about rehab, whatever injury she's come back from in the past. That alone should make UConn fans get excited. But it's not just about getting her back to 100% physically. We're seeing a new version of Paige in terms of leadership. Geno Auriemma has been talking about this recently and how Paige has really stepped into that leadership role. She's always been vocal, but now it seems like there's more command to that voice, more assertiveness with her teammates. It's like she's matured into this role where she knows that the team's success isn't just about her scoring points, but about leading everyone else to play at the best of their ability. In past years, UConn players like Nika Mule handled that leadership and responsibility, but now Paige is really helping to fill that void. And we have to talk about the way she's balancing this role while also being the team's best player. I think that to me is the biggest hurdle of any player that is the most talented player on the team, to then also show leadership in ways other than with performance or by actions. Because I hate to say this, but I think it's easier for people who are less vocal as a person who speaks for a living. But I think partly it's because it's hard to put in words sometimes how you feel without being condescending or in a negative tone. And I think Paige's ability to be both a not a talker, but the opposite of that, the show, not the verbal aspect of it. But you need both as a leader. You can't just be a quiet person and lead a team. It's kind of impossible. And people are going to give me different examples of coaches who are conservative or don't talk a lot, but they still at moments of trials and tribulations can connect with their players or their teammates through verbal conflict, through verbal exchanges. She's coming off this, work tour, as she called it, where she's improved her conditioning as well. But I think the leadership aspect of this is really about kind of getting her into that transformational mind of, we're doing this because I say so, because I'm empowered by coach and the staff to get you guys in the right position. That's really important to me. And I think that's going to make her even more dangerous this year. And you can already see it early in practices from every report that's coming out. that she is more vocal. She's more confident. And that's exactly what UConn needs from this year, for her this year. And something that Geno has been calling on for, I think, multiple years now. Now, let's switch over to Caitlyn Chen, who I talked about in an episode about coming over as the Ivy League Player of the Year. She's used to being the focal point of a team. But UConn, it's a whole new level. You know, as people say this all the time, there's levels to this game, right? You know, I've covered mid-major basketball for years, some really good basketball in the mid-major world, both men's and women's, but levels. Ivy League is not a mid-major, but it's a step up from that, but it's not the elite level that UConn plays. So this is a whole new beast, right? And I think Kaitlyn is adapting to a faster, more demanding style of play because I think that suits her. One of the things that I remember Geno talking about in his first media availability when he kind of pumped the brakes on people talking about national championship with us was he loves the way that Kaitlyn has come in with that aggressive mindset, is not thinking about that I was an Ivy League Player of the Year. She's just go, go, go and being aggressive and attacking based off of what he wants. And that's not easy to do. And so it's also not easy to come into a program like UConn where these expectations are through the roof. And that's not Kaitlyn's fault. That's Geno's fault for being such a prolific coach. But I think Kaitlyn has the veteran savvy and the experience to handle that. What's interesting is that she's still finding her voice within the team. And I think that that's going to be key because you don't want to override or kind of or overstep your bounds as a new player coming into kind of Paige's and UConn's ecosystem. But I think she brings something really important. I think that's something that teams really need sometimes is someone to come in and take the reins when, I mean, Paige isn't going to play 40 minutes a game. I hope not. I mean, if she has to, we're in trouble. So the idea that we have someone like Caitlyn Chen that can come in and be a steady and calming presence, that's huge. On the men's side, that's Hassan Diarra, right? And I think that is something that is really important to have veteran grad students / seniors that are really critical to how you win ball games. But let's not forget, she's a playmaker. She's really savvy with the ball. She'll take a lot of pressure off Paige in the ball handling ability and let her just be a scorer. I think there's a dynamic between the two that is going to give them kind of a duo that can really play off each other, whether they're playing together or separate. I think that's going to be really key for UConn going forward. So some kind of questions to consider from that conversation about Kaitlyn and Paige is, can Beckers and Chen leadership styles coexist? I think the answer to that question is yes. And how might that balance play out over the course of the season? I think that's going to also depend on some of the other stuff we're going to talk about in this episode, which is the promise of depth and some of the younger players and how they develop. I think what Geno would like to do is they're probably going to play together a lot initially, but then eventually maybe Kaitlyn's leading kind of the second team, so to speak, and giving Paige a break when some of those players come out. And Kaitlyn, I think, is going to be kind of more of a Swiss Army knife for them. And I think that's going to be really important for Geno and how he shapes and molds this team. So for me, I think another question to talk through on that segment is how Paige's new leadership role will impact her performance on the court this season. I think it's going to enhance it. I think she's going to really be a phenomenal player, both with playmaking, with her ability to get her teammates open, with her kind of leadership style in the new vocal Paige to kind of like get people in line. And I honestly think it's going to be a fantastic coexistence between Kaitlyn and Paige and how they're going to mesh with each other on the court. When we return, we're going to talk about inexperience and opportunity and what that means. Hey, Husky fans, it's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we pooled over $20,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With the Roy app, you can direct your support to athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to specific players you choose. Unlike the collectives that we all support, you know exactly where your support is going. It's going directly to the player, and you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. The best part of it, it's risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't deliver on the content you think you're going to get, you get your money back. This week, I'm supporting Nick Evers, quarterback for the UConn Huskies. I just pitched in $100, and I'd love for you to join me. Even $10 makes a difference. Let's show Nick some love and keep him connected to our school and the UConn faithful. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets your team up for success. Plus, don't miss out on Roy's exciting giveaway. Win 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download the Roy app, create an account, and enter referral code LOCKED ON, and you're entered. Already on Roy? Any contribution to any athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Download Roy now and join the NIL game with no subscription and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_return. And honestly, guys, this is such a really cool opportunity. Support the players, change the game. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn, exploring some interesting stuff going on with the UConn women. Interesting in the respect that I think it's really cool that Caitlyn Chen has kind of moved up in the conversation, that she's kind of the Robin to the Batman that is Paige for this season, and I'm excited to see her contribution. But let's move on to some UConn's underclassmen, because this is where things get really interesting. We've talked about how UConn has a solid core of veterans, but the reality is that this team will need some of the younger players to step up in a big way. And we're already seeing flashes of what could be, along with some of the usual growing pains you expect from underclassmen. Let's start with Kaitlyn Samuels. She's one of those players that has shown both brilliance and inconsistency during early practices. Geno has mentioned that she'll have a great week followed by a not so great week. And honestly, that's typical for younger players trying to find their footing in high-pressure programs like UConn. But when Samuels is on, she's really on, and she has the athleticism and raw talent to be a key contributor. But the question is, can she do it consistently? That's what separates good players from great ones, and Geno is clearly pushing her to reach that level. And in the flashes we've seen suggests that she could be there. Then there's Jana Alfy, who's in a really interesting spot. She missed her entire freshman year. She's also got that extra fire to prove herself this season. But as Geno put it, sometimes she's like a bull in a china shop. She's got all that energy and all the physicality, but she needs to learn how to control it. And that's not uncommon for a young player as well, especially with her size and presence. She's going to be a force on this team in the lane, no doubt about that. But the key for Alfy is learning when to use that aggression. And also what I think is going to be interesting for me is I think that there's an opportunity for her to be that stretch five that they really haven't had in this program in a very long time. And I think Jana has that ability. If you saw a little bit of first night, you saw, obviously these are uncontested shots, but you saw both her and Sarah Strong hit some really long threes. And I think that's going to be something that really stretches this game out and creates spacing, something that UConn has had, but they really haven't had both the inside and out in a while. I know Lee Edwards is an All-American. She's now in the WNBA, but I'm talking about the 6'5", 6'6" presence of Jana that I think is going to be really tough to stop this season. On Jana, she's her own worst enemy, and I'm gonna quote Geno Auriemma right now. And literally, the first thing is a repeat of what I said. She's her own worst enemy because she's in a hurry. She wants to make up for a year and a half of not playing on every possession. So we're trying to get that pace a little bit better. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can you imagine if you were so excited to be at UConn and you know that you have all this ability and you can't showcase it to your teammates, to your coaches, to the people that you know and love that helps you get to this point. And I think that that's something to really focus on with Jana. If she really, it's kind of like when they say the game has really slowed down for that person. When that happens for Jana, she's going to be an absolute force. And I think that is so important for this UConn women's team to be back to what they are, which is a force in women's basketball. And I think it's going to be a really interesting balancing act when we talk about that going forward. And what I love about these two really with Caitlyn and Jana is they represent the future of UConn basketball. Sure, they'll have their ups and downs this season, but the potential is there for both of them to become stars in their own right. And I think that word star is a little overrated. So even though I know I wrote that and I'm talking about it here, I think there's some connotation with that. You're kind of, and I want to put some context around it. A star in their own right would mean, for me, they're playing to their capabilities or above their ability because that's what's asked of them. And like Paige is a superstar because she does everything. And she's also likely, arguably, the best player in college basketball. But you need more than one elite player on your team to win a championship. And I think Geno and UConn fans know that more than anybody. So that's what I mean by that. And I think if we can create some new stars like Jana, like Caitlyn, like Sarah Strong, Allie Ziebell, Morgan Jelly, Caitlyn Chen, then what we're going to have is a core of players, Ashlyn Shade, KK Arnold, amongst others. We're going to have a core of players that truly are going to feel confident that their fellow teammate can deliver without feeling like they have to do more than they should. So some questions to consider in terms of this segment in general. Can Kaitlyn Chen really turn her flashes of brilliance into consistent performance this season? I think only time will tell. And I think some of the opportunity that she's going to get early in the season with some of the folks that are going to be on the injured reserve, so to speak, is really going to make or break her ability to be consistent, because it's hard to be consistent when you get choppy minutes. So initially, she's probably going to get quite a few, especially with some of Geno's comments that we're going to talk about with the depth concerns. Is how much is she going to play? Is she going to play 20 minutes a game? Is she going to play 15 minutes a game? Is that enough to get her in the flow with consistent performance this season? That remains to be seen. Does Jana need to control her aggression and use it effectively on the court? Absolutely. That's something that we are going to talk about a lot this year and kind of see, is she going to pick up meaningless fouls that puts UConn in a disadvantage with having to sit her? And UConn's underclassmen, how quickly do they develop? And what role will they play in building this team's depth? I think initially they're going to be playing a lot more than they thought. But maybe not. I think based off of, where people were injured last season and knowing they'd be on pitch counts and knowing that they'd be, held back a little bit, maybe the conversations were more about, when you come into this role, it's going to be a lot faster ramp up than you probably thought. But I know you're going to like that. So I think that there's probably some, not necessarily promise of play, but promise of the opportunity to play, and being exacerbated by the fact that their depth is less with three women that are essentially on the mend. So we shall see. When we return, we're going to talk about the promise of depth in fresh faces like Allie Ziebell and what's to come after this. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with big return from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I don't know if you guys know this, but if you use FanDuel and you actually use this kind of like not live betting format, but you can actually watch the game on the screen and bet each play. It's kind of wild. If you're a degenerate gambler and you love it, go nuts. Because if you haven't already, you get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com to get started. All right, I'm back on Locked On UConn. We've talked a little bit about Caitlyn Chen, a little bit about Paige Bueckers, and how they're going to share leadership duties. And I think what's going to be really interesting for them is, again, how they handle some of the rotational stuff that goes on with Geno and his staff, playing together, playing apart, things of that nature. So I think what's going to be really interesting is obviously the development of different players. We talked about Caitlyn Samuel's ability to be a potential star, and kind of how that her flashes of brilliance can be more about flashes of consistency. And then also with Jana Alfy kind of reviewing some of her game and how this can be a position for her to really kind of take it step by step, day by day, not to look at this as as Geno called it, trying to make up for a year and a half of play in one possession. So, but as we move forward and look about this, fresh faces like Allie Ziebell, who really kind of popped on first night with showing her ability as a shooter. We're going to talk about something that UConn really hasn't had a lot of recently, and that's depth. I think this season feels different because for the first time in a while, Geno Auriemma has 8 or 9 players who are ready to contribute tomorrow. If there was a game tomorrow, he said that there would be, to look at some of these notes, if we had a game tomorrow, this is Geno's quote, there'd be 8 or 9 guys that are going to play a lot, he said, and we haven't had that in a long time. So that is music to UConn fans' ears, because even if it's not players that you thought were going to be there, it's players that Geno brought in that are going to be ready to rock. So Ziebell has already made a name for herself, as I just mentioned. First night, she lit up the 3-point contest. I think, what's been more impressive is how she's shown a more complete game in practice. And that's something that we chronicled early in this transition to having a women's show and a men's show. Is Allie is a complete player. So is Morgan. So is Sarah. They all can do it all, and they might have specialized ability. Like Ziebell may be a specialist in 3-point shooting, as you saw. She made like 11 of her first 12 in the 3-point shootout. But Sarah is more of probably has a really great passing ability, but she also is a phenomenal rebounder, averaging 17 rebounds a game in high school. And Morgan did a little bit of everything in high school. So I think some of these newer girls are going to really show their ability, and that they do have this all-around game that we all kind of crave, because in this age of kind of positional versatility on the women's and men's side, it's not just you don't want just shooters. You want people who can do everything, but having people that can stretch the floor and having people with the type of range that Allie has shown even recently really can kind of help out driving lanes for Paige, driving lanes for KK Arnold and others. So, but Allie's she's not just a shooter. So I want to make sure that I'm being very clear about that. She's someone who can create her own shot, move without the ball, and defend at a really high level. So it's early, but I think Ziebell has the potential to be a major piece for UConn this season. If she can continue to develop at this pace, she'll not only provide depth, but also give UConn another scoring option when they need it the most. And here's the also exciting part. This team's depth goes again past just her. As we just talked about with Geno, 8 or 9 players would see significant minutes if there was a game tomorrow. That's something that has been crucial to this team. And some of it is obviously the biggest reason why they couldn't really finish the deal and a absolutely surprise run to the Final Four as a 3 seed. And if you can rely on a deep bench, you're not just relying on your stars to carry you every single night. That's also another point. With players like AZ Fudd and Aubrey Griffin working their way back from injuries, this depth becomes even more valuable. When Fudd and Griffin are fully healthy, UConn will have a rotation that can outlast almost anyone in the country. This depth allows a team to keep their legs fresh for obvious reasons and maintain that intensity throughout the court. I think this is going to have a trickle-down effect on this team and a ripple throughout the team that is going to be really kind of seen late in the year. Because if you have the ability to bring in a healthy AZ Fudd at the end of the year and a healthy Aubrey Griffin, to even if it's just from like January to March for that sprint going towards another NCAA title, that's not something that people can really say on any other team in the country. So some really things to kind of think about from the entire episode. How will Kaitlyn and Paige work together? I think they're going to work together great. Jana and Cadence's emergences, as well as Allie and Sarah and others, as far as getting that depth where it needs to be, the type of role that AZ Fudd and Aubrey Griffin will play when they return, and how Geno kind of meshes all that together is going to be really interesting to watch. I'm excited, guys, as we get another day closer to the start of basketball season. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm Mark Snedo, asking you to stay locked on, stay connected, and to remember, it's not just about getting it done. It's about doing it in a way that it can't be done any better. That's our goal every day. Thank you, Geno, for that quote. And as always, go Huskies.